a tight Yorkshireman, a bargain always appeals to me. And one thing that caught my eye lately was a promotion that Angling Direct are doing, selling a whip like this, a rig, and a bag of Fjuka 2-in-1 to anybody who spends £10 in store. Now, obviously that's not really of interest to me as a match angler and somebody who's got plenty of tackle and plenty of bait, but it's of great interest to anybody looking to get their kids into fishing. Or maybe you've got a friend or some children of a friend who you want to take fishing for the first time. It's a great way of getting people into the sport, so all credit to Angling Direct for doing it. So what do you get with the package? Well, I went into Angling Direct in Sheffield this morning and picked one up to find out. And the whip looks absolutely lovely. You can get a 3 or a 4 metre whip. This one's one of the 3 metres. You get a bag of Fjuka 2-in-1, and there's a rig that comes with it, and all that's on the proviso that you spend a tenner. So I thought if we think carefully about what we spend our tenner on, we should be able to get a really good fit for purpose starter kit to help people catch the first fish, basically. So I had a look at the rig that comes with it, and I must say I wasn't too impressed with that. It's quite a bulbous float, some big shot on there, not ideally suited to UK commercials, but as we've got to spend a tenner anyway, you can buy one of the ready rigs. Now, Drennan do a brilliant range of ready rigs. This is one of the Big Carp AS Drennan ready rigs. It's a 0.4 gram, always worth going 0.3, 0.4 gram for commercials up to about 3 or 4 feet deep when you're fishing the whip. You don't want anything much heavier than that, otherwise it's too heavy and you'll probably find you miss a few bites on it. So we bought ourselves a new rig and we bought ourselves some hook lengths. It's all about balancing your rigs and your hook lengths, and the idea is if you hook a massive fish or hook the bottom or something like that, and you need to have a hook length that's going to snap before your rig does, so you get your rig back and you just replace the hook length. So what we've bought there is an SFLB in size 16 to 011 reflow power, and that's a pre-tied Preston hook length that comes on a pin, so they're really nice. A couple of other things you need to get fishing, just to make life easy. Pincers. I like a nice thin pair of pliers. I use these for putting shot on. It's much better than biting them on with your teeth. But also if you get a fish that's hooked awkwardly or deep hooked, these double up to help you disgorge the fish if you catch one that's awkwardly hooked. Pair of snips. Obviously these are the Preston ones, standard pair of scissors will do, but a smallish pair is good as it allows you to trim fairly tight to your knots. A plummet, I'll show you how to use that in a minute for plumbing the depth, and a set of Preston Innovations stocks or shot, anything like that's fine, and we'll use these just to get that float dotted down nicely so we can see obviously all the bites that we're going to get, but again we'll go through that in a second. I've got a bait box here as well, which I'm going to put the Fjuka 2-in-1 in, and I'm actually going to do that now because I know this peg reasonably well, so I'm going to just put a few of the 2-in-1s in the tub. It's a hot day today, so what we're going to do, we're going to put just a few pieces of 2-in-1 in the tub. Don't want to get them all out as they will dry out today unless we keep them covered up, so we're just going to fold the bag over, keep them dry, and I'm actually going to start trickling 2 or 3 bits of bait into the peg. I'm not feeding a lot, but the idea is we're going to try and build a little bit of competition. So get the fish there, get them competing, so when we start fishing they'll be ready to go. Then we're going to set the whip up. So I'm going to get rid of the rig that comes with this as standard. As I said, not really fit for purpose for UK fishing, to be honest, so we're going to get rid of that. We're just going to score that cellophane off and put that rig down there behind me, throw that away later. And you open up the rig, you'll see on the end of it you've got quite a bulbous connector, which is perfect for beginners. We can put our rig on there, and it's also thick enough to mean we'll probably land some decent sized fish on that. Fish to probably a couple of pound I'd hope to get in on that. If we're targeting fish much bigger than that, we'd probably want to elasticate the top section of the whip, but again that's a separate topic, and to be honest, if you're new to fishing we're probably getting a bit technical, so we're just going to use this as supplied. So as I said, I've got the Drennan ready rig here. Get that out of the packet, and then you'll find on the end of the rig, I'll just take that off there, you've got a loop, which is perfect because what we actually do is attach the loop onto that connector at the end of the whip. It's just a sleeve, it pulls round and we push that little thin sleeve up, and that just locks the actual whip, the actual rig onto the whip, and then we're just going to unravel that and slide the whip out as we do. We're just going to give it a good firm tug so that we know each of the whip sections is locked together. And it's only 3 meters, this one, so. Right, we're actually in a situation with this particular rig, having took it out of the packet, where it's probably about, I'd say 2 to 2.5 foot too long for the whip. Ideally, you want the rig to come to about a foot short of the end of the whip, just for comfortable fishing. So all we're going to do is we're going to actually shorten that down so it's the right length. But before you do that, if you don't know the lake, always check the depth, because obviously if the water's deeper than the rig, then you're better off compromising and having a rig that's a little bit longer than the whip. So always put a plummet on first and check. Now I can see that's a 6-inch hook length. I know it's not quite as deep as the rig is here, so I'll just show what we do with that. I'm going to drop that in out there, and as I said, I can see it's probably about 2.5 foot deep there, maybe a bit less, 2 foot deep probably. So we're going to slide that rig down. Now, one of the beauties of whip fishing, although it's only a 3 meter whip, we'll probably end up fishing about 4 or 5 meters today, because you do swing out past where you're fishing. And that's actually a little bit too shallow now, so you can see about 1.5 meters past the tip of the whip. We're around about 4 or 5 inches over depth at that, under depth, sorry, at that. So we'll get it plumbed up perfectly before we adjust that length of line. So now I can see that's on the bottom. We can see the plummet's not pulling the float under too much, so we're just rested on the bottom there, which is about perfect for what we want to be doing today. So we'll swing that in. So now we know how long the rig's going to be, and we can comfortably shorten down the length of line at the top of the whip. And all we're going to do that is pull about 2.5, 3 foot of line off, so that we know it's about right. Tie a loop in the line. All I do is tie a normal loop, but instead of going through once, I actually go through 3 times, moisten it, and pull tight. And we're then going to trim off the line above the loop, trim off the line that's used on the connector. Very important if you're new to fishing. One of the biggest bits of negative press us anglers get is to do with littering, and especially to do with leaving discarded lengths of line. So always make sure you trim the line right down so it's no more than 1 inch in length, and that way no birds can get tangled in it, no harm can come of it. And then I just put it on the side tray and I'll chuck that away later. But I always like to do that as soon as I create a length of line. I always like to just trim it like that, so you know, even if the worst case should happen and you should lose it or it blows away, it's not going to hurt any wildlife. Right, so we're just replacing that loop in that connector as before, and then we're now about the length of line and everything we're going to fish. And you can see, as I said, when I bring that in, it's around about 1 foot, 18 inches shorter than the length of the whip. So that's really nice and comfortable. And we're going to fish it round about there. So that's around about 1.5 meters past the tip of the whip. And as before, we're just going to feed a little bit of bait. So hopefully, when we start fishing, there's a few fish out there waiting for us. Right. Now this hook, I've looked at it on this Drennan Ready rig. It's probably a little bit heavy for what I'd want. As I said, these hook lengths here are on a 11. I think this looks a fair bit heavier than that. So I'm going to replace that hook length. So I've got a nice light hook length on there. So all I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to trim off the hook right next to the knot so that there's no line attached. Put that with my rubbish. Likewise, trim off the loop of the hook length just above it and pull it through so that we know that's not going to tangle or cause us any problems. Put it in and then these hook lengths are supplied on a pin, so we'll just take them out of the packet. Again, dispose of that responsibly afterwards. And then it's dead easy actually to attach a hook length. All you do is take one of the loops off the pins top there, that just drops off. You then push your main line loop through your hook length loop, and the hook goes back through the main line loop. Okay, so we've now got a nice finer hook length on that. Now the shotting it's not so important really with whip fishing to have you know, anything in particular until you fish for a while and found out how the fish are having it. But what I'll probably do today, because it's shallow, I don't really want any, you know, solid resistance, and I probably want that float to cock straight away. I'm just going to spread them shot out so I've got a nice sort of strung rig formation there, and that's just going to give the bait as natural a fall through the water as possible. Often with pre-supplied rigs they're slightly undershotted, so let's just check and see how that behaves in the water. As I thought, it looks to me like that needs at least one more shot, maybe a couple more shot on there. As I said, you really only want the bristle of the float showing. Any more than that and you stand the risk of basically not seeing the bites. So I'm going to put another number 9 stot on there, and I'm actually going to put that under the float. So number 9 stot just under the float. It might take a couple more than that, looking at how undershotted it was. That's a number 9 stot. Just push that under the float there. Managed to hook the old trousers, but the beauty of barbless hooks is you can get them straight out. That's better, but it still needs another one. I think one more number 9 will not be far off at that. And what I'm going to do with this one, because as I said, I think it only needs one more. Good little tip this, put it above the float, this last one. And you might think that's silly, that's not going to work on the line, but we're then going to slide that down so it's right next to the eye of the float. And what that means is it'll be working on the float, but if, for example, we think that's too much, or if the wind got up and we needed more bristle or anything like that, we can just slide that away. And you can see now we've got, that's nearly right. I'd like a little bit more, a little bit less bristle than that, but that's okay. I'm happy to start with that, see how we get on. I might put another trimmer on in a little while, but sometimes you do find that rigs take on a little bit of water. And a good tip as well, if you're close to having it shotted perfect but not quite, is put a bit of spit on the bristle. So what that does, it degreases it, and we might even now find that sits perfectly. Right, let's see what we can catch. So, single piece of Fjuka on the hook, and we're just going to hook that like a maggot, just nick it on the hook. Plenty of hook points showing. So when I plumbed up, I was lining up with the platform opposite. It's really important to have a marker that you plumb up in line with so that you know roughly where you're aiming for. Then all we're going to do is swing out the rig and drop it down. I'm going to feed bite straight away there we are, and a roach, good roach straight away. Now that's quite typical of whip fishing, because lovely little roach on the first cast, because we're fishing past the tip of the pole. It's similar to when you swing a rig out on a pole, you actually get a really nice natural presentation because there's no shadow of the pole over where you're fishing. So another little piece of yellow Fjuka 2-in-1, swing that out in front again, get in line with a marker, feed 4 or 5 bits of bait, a little dink there straight away. Oh, missed that one. Now I just committed a cardinal sin of whip fishing then. I struck far too hard, and you'll do the same when you do it for the first time. It's not about striking like Zorro, it's just about doing it just hard enough to set the hook. So we're not going to feed again that time because bites were quite quick then, so we'll just flick that out. I can see there's, I think something's on that, yeah, small fish straight away there. Look at that, lovely. So another little piece of the yellow Fjuka 2-in-1. In we go again. 3 pieces of bait. You can see all we're trying to do is create competition by regular little dink there. That's a slightly better fish. Might need the net for that one actually. Yeah, it's a nice roach. Look at that. My favourite fish in the world. I hope we get some of these on the Trent tomorrow. Got a match on the Trent, and that's exactly the sort of fish we'll be fishing for, but they're gorgeous. And again, you can see a really good fast bite on the 2-in-1. So we'll catch one more, folks, and then we'll probably sign off. But I think you get the idea of how quick and easy it can be to catch fish using a simple whip setup that costs, say, a tenner for the whip, probably 20 quid in total for the whole setup. But obviously £10 of that's free, because Angling Direct give you the whip free when you spend a tenner in store. So we'll swing that out again. 3 or 4 bits of Fjuka around it, little dink there straight away. We threw that a bit further than I wanted to. Ideally you want to be feeding around your float or just this side of your float, but it will take you a while to get your iron. No bite that, or a little dink there. And the nice thing about whip fishing and why it's good for beginners, it's quite an active way of fishing. I wouldn't advocate, especially when there's some smaller fish feeding like this, I wouldn't advocate waiting too long. So if that doesn't go under in a second, I shall bring it back in, swing it back out and feed again. Oh, that was a bite. Getting a bit carried away on the strike there. Line's just wrapped around the tip of the float. It's hard when you're getting dead regular bites. You do want to strike probably a bit harder than you should. Don't worry too much about it. The beauty of buying a pre-tied rig on a fairly thick line like we have there, I mean this is on about 0.18 I think, is if you do get a tangle like I did there, it does just generally come undone. Just take your time when you're unravelling it, and obviously if you need to get rid of the hook length you can do that. So another little piece yellow Fjuka on the hook, swing it out past the pole tip, that goes down there, feed in 3 bits of bait, 4 bits of bait around the float, a bit better with the feeding that time. And we'll try and not strike as hard. It's just about training yourself so that when you get a dink and getting a feel for your tackle, so you just lift it into a fish rather than striking really aggressively. No bite, so we lift it out, flick it in again. And that's been a lesson. It seems that the fish are definitely having it fairly soon after it hits the water. And that's why that strung shot's quite good, because it means that you're presenting the bait as it falls through the water. Little dink there, another nice roach. Hooked just in the top lip, we can actually swing that one into hand. There you are folks, nice bit of simple whip fishing. As I'm sure you'll agree, it's a great way of getting kids into fishing because it's dead direct. You strike into fish, you feel every shake of the head through the whip. It's simple, it's easy. So if you've got a friend or somebody who's never been fishing before and you want to give them a taste of it, nice and cheap, get down to Angling Direct, spend a tenner, get one of these. The only other thing they really need for fish safety is a landing net. I've obviously got a landing net and a handle here. If you're a tight Yorkshireman like me, or like I used to be, a bank stick will actually do, one of the long extending bank sticks, and they're about a tenner rather than 40 quid for a handle. So depends on your budget obviously, but a landing net and a handle is important just for fish safety. So there you are folks. I hope you've enjoyed that. Plenty of tips on whip fishing.